Hamilton, this is Matthew Green, your very proud NDP candidate, right here in Hamilton Center for another edition of Parliament to the People, Parle to the People. This morning's topic, we are going to be discussing education. What is the government's role in education? And the federal government play a role through transfer payments to create a world class education system across the country. This morning I'm going to be attending a rally down at Eva Rothwell Center that's going to be to save City School. City School was a program that was instituted by Mohawk College to provide barrier free education to people so that they can have access to post secondary education. And they put it in the North End neighborhood. These are communities through studies, through social studies, were determined to have what are called, code red neighborhoods. And what we have now is a system that, people can live in this city their entire lives and never set foot on a campus. City School changed that. City School gave people access to post-secondary education in a way that that we'd never had before. So I know for a fact that people had, for the first times perhaps, taken college courses and had the opportunity to take college courses for the first time because it was barrier free. It's not because they weren't smart enough or weren't motivated enough. It's just that the barriers to entry to get into post-secondary education was higher than what they were able to handle. City School changed that. City School gave them the opportunity to get on and get college courses and realize that they too could be actively involved in post-secondary education. And that's big. And I think to cancel that is a shame. It's an absolute shame that this provincial government or Mohawk decided through cuts and austerity that they were going to cut this program. Now, here's the problem. The problem is that when we have governments that sit on massive surpluses provincially, like Doug Ford did, while cutting social programs and then giving tax cuts to the ultra rich, $200 to everyday people, I think we've lost the plot as a society. We've lost the plot about what value is. When we do all of these cuts, deep cuts to social services, so that billionaires, multi-billionaires, and multimillionaires can get their tax cuts, working class people get crumbs, and then the programs and services that we come to rely on are gutted, which is what happened. Shout out to people who are tuning in. This is Matthew Green, Parliament to the People. We got Ottawa time on TikTok. I see you. Thanks for tuning in. We have some folks on Instagram and Facebook. I appreciate you for tuning in. If you have the opportunity, this is going to be a short one this morning. We're talking about education. I want you to think about what a compelling alternative could be for Canadians when it comes to education in this country. I want you to think about what it would truly look like if every Canadian, every person had the opportunity to access post-secondary education without the burden of a massive debt, without the burden of having to simultaneously, cover their, not just their tuition and their books, but their room and their board. Imagine if in this labor market, we treated education as a deep investment in the future of our economy, in the future of our civil society, because we know that education, for all intents and purposes, creates deeper understanding, more tolerance. What would it look like? Put it in the comments. Feel free to drop it in the comments what you think a world-class education system would look like. Somebody commented, why do you never talk about Canada complicit in the genocide in Gaza? You must be new. I'm literally wearing a kofia, my friend. You must be new. Rather than engage you on what I think is a pretty ridiculous comment to make, particularly to me, just take a second and go look at my Instagram. Go do that. Check out the Instagram and then come back and engage in the discussion in good faith, because that comment is pretty ridiculous. I'm here literally sitting in a coffee and this person saying I don't talk about the genocide in Gaza. That's ridiculous. Today I'm talking about education. Okay? That's what I'm doing today. We're talking about education, and we're going to see what's going on right now in the comment section. What do we got? We have education should always be free. Jason says, we are always better off with free education. Karen says, good for you. Shout out to you too, Karen. Love what we're talking about for Hamilton. I live beside your election office. Oh, that's amazing, Jason. Yeah, man. We're right here. I'm in the office right now, and come on over. You know what I mean? We're building something beautiful here in Hamilton Center. There's all types of uncertainty in the city, but our support is holding. We have really strong support. I think most people in Hamilton understand that in this moment of deep uncertainty, of electoral uncertainty, although it's becoming clearer and clearer, Carney is pulling ahead, that there still needs to be strong working class voices in Parliament. That's what I know to be true. We got some folks tuning in from TikTok now. We are talking about educations. We're talking about, okay, people have some. Erica, rebuild Erica. Will a billionaire millionaire tax be the ignition for funding a free education? If yes, the answer to that is yes. Yes. Tax the rich. Yes. Tax the rich, pay for services, distribute the prosperity in the economy. The ultra wealthy profit from our tax system. They profit from our education system in the way in which we train workers to go on and work in the labor market that ultimately benefits the capitalist class, the billionaire class. They're benefiting from the social good, but they're not paying back to it because they're not paying their fair share in taxes. And so when you look at the labor market, do you know what I mean? Like, the corporations have stopped investing in research and development. They've stopped investing in the training of workers. When workers are well trained, they have to be paid more. And so rather than pay a solid working class, middle class base, the corporations of this country have decided to try to replace them constantly and consistently with low paid labor. That's the problem that we have right now, is that when you talk about productivity, capitalism demands infinite growth and infinite productivity, but it refuses to pay the same infinite growth in wages and benefits. Instead, it creates precarity. It makes people in a position where they got to take any job at any pay just to get by. So costs continue to go up, wages stay the same. I believe that by having a deeper and greater education, barrier free in the country, have transfer payments to provinces that are conditional on outcomes, that we can't commodify education. What does commodify mean? Commodify means profiteering off of education. You might ask, in Canada, who profits? That's an important question. In all politics, the important question is cui bono, who benefits? I would argue that when we have tuitions set at what they're set at, and students and young people having to take out astronomical debt, at the banks benefit. That's what I would argue, that when you have to work 15 years just to pay off your university tuition, all of that interest, not going down on the principal, and then you got the Bank of Canada doing the yo-yos with the interest rates, it's the banks that benefit. And the asinine thing is, the banks don't really lend you that money. You borrow it into existence. That's how the fractional reserve banking system works. I'm not going to go on to a fractional reserve banking rant, but if you don't believe me, just type it out. How does Canada's fractional reserve banking system work? What it means is if a bank has $2 in its pocket, it can lend out 10 on a promissory note, on a loan, on a debt instrument that you then pay back. You pay it back. You borrow the money into existence and pay it back in exchange for hours off your life, which is your hourly wage. That's how the system works. I'm still here, Steve Robinson. I'm still here. I am still here, and I'm not going away. I'm not going away. PET scans are blocked. They profit from our labor. I'm just trying to keep up with all the comments. I'm going to try to answer them to the best of my abilities. This is Parliament to the People. My name is Matthew Green, your very proud NDP candidate right here in Hamilton Center. I'm bouncing back and forth between the comment sections. So forgive me if I haven't had a chance to keep up. I'm now going back to Instagram. Isra, my friend Isra says, we want school to have strong programs in writing and mathematics. Yes. Ellie or L Peacock states, you clearly haven't been present at many of the rallies Matthew has been at. Yes. I appreciate the support in the comment section. Messi wants to join on. My friend from Ottawa. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead. This is what I love about Parliament to the People is like, let's talk about it. Feel free to jump on and let me see how I can get this link. I'm going to put the link in the comment section. And if you want to jump on the conversation, I'm going to invite you to do that. So I'm going to put it on. I'm going to put it on here for Instagram, and then I'm going to do the same thing on TikTok. All right, Instagram, there's your Restream invite list. Here's Facebook's and YouTube's invite. And then I'm going to go over to TikTok, and I'm going to do the same there. Parliament to the People. This is your chance. You got something to say. You want to be heard. You let people know who you are, where you're from, and what you're all about. I'll even do the same on TikTok. So the conservatives that are out there, you want to jump on and you want to have a discussion, let's do that too. That's what democracy is all about. That's how I think democracy is. I don't think it's shouting you down. When you can disagree with what I say, let's talk about it. I will say this, though. I don't debate people's right to exist. I don't debate their humanity. And so I'll talk about policy, but I will not debate people's humanity. I don't debate human rights. So I don't deny genocide. I don't vilify people for the religion they have, or the language they speak, or the color of their skin, or who they love, or what their gender and expression is. If that's what you want to talk about, I'm not the one. I am not the one. The topic today is education, though. So if you are down, this is Parliament to the People. We're going to talk a little bit about education. Let's talk about world-class education. There's lots of doom and gloom out there. There's lots of doom and gloom. In other words, there are lots of people who, are seeing the world for what it is, quite rightly, and are losing hope. I understand that. But in this moment, we can also imagine a compelling alternative for our future. It does not have to be this way. All of our systems and structures are complete figments of our imagination, their ideas, their thoughts, their perceived values that are reflected politically. We can adapt to the moment and change those values to include more people, to support more people, to take care of one another, to educate people, to house people, to make sure that people are protected when they fall down on tough times. We can do all those things. It does not have to be a zero-sum game with winners and losers. It doesn't have to be that way. That's the way they'd like it to be, because as long as they could do it that way, they can divide us and then they can conquer us. Very vocal about new change. I'm back to TikTok reading some of these comments on here. I'm enjoying it. I've spent a lot of time away from TikTok, but my goal is to connect people to the process of government. So I'm really committed to trying to meet everybody where they're at. That's my goal, is I want to meet you where you're at. So if you have questions and comments, feel free to put that in the comment section. Shout out to you, CIF 87, taking it back almost 10 years. Time goes by quick. Time goes by real quick. So the comment is, education is largely a provincial issue, but is there any appetite at the federal level to end discriminatory practices, from separate schools. Let's take it back a step. I believe that there needs to be a standard of education, a national standard on education that is world class. I believe that when the federal government transfers funds, that it can do that conditional on outcomes, conditional that we're not commodifying our education and allowing privatization. And there's lots of talks about whether or not school should be secular or whether or not it should continue to respect the wishes. I think that, from my position, and again, that is a provincial a provincial decision. From my perspective, what I want to see in all of our democratic institutions is more democracy. What does that look like? Deliberative engagement and participation from people, that on issues like that, we should have the discussion across the province. We should, be open to ideas through referendum, through direct voting. Because the reason why people don't vote is because they feel like their vote doesn't matter. And they feel like their vote doesn't matter because the things that politicians say at elections aren't always the things that happen. But if we had systems like they have in different places, I believe Australia, lots of other places around the world, when it comes to having referendums, provided that they are clearly put and that they have, good processes in place for the voting system. Yeah, like, I think we should have referendums on difficult discussions, and then it's up to people who care about the issues to go out and organize around them, engage their neighbors. Politics in Canada has become too passive. That's why I do this exchange and this engagement. Jason is still on Huxley. Yes, I'm in Huxley. I'm in the cooperators right now. Hopefully our signs will go up by the end of the week. Talking about affordable housing, we absolutely do, and affordable rent. That is absolutely a situation that Canadians should have access to. Past generations had access to affordable housing and affordable rent. That was a Canadian value at what time? What happened? Well, what happened was we allowed the corporate capture of our housing market to be flipped into a real estate market, into a finance market of loans and debts and mortgages. That's what happened there. So we need to take that back. We need to recapture our housing market so that it's not commodified in the way that it's been. And we need to make it available to people. Because imagine what the local economy would look like if people didn't have to spend half of their damn paycheck on rent or their mortgage. I want to see a space where people have more discretionary income to go out and spend in local stores, local businesses, local restaurants. I want them to have joy in their life. What does that mean? You need to have recreation in your life in order for it to be joyful. You can't work 80 hours in a week and claim that you're free. We can't claim to be a free society if people have to work 2-3 jobs just to get by. That's not freedom. That's indentured servitude in a capitalist system. So I want people to be paid well. I want you to be paid well. I want workers to have value for the wealth that they create in this country, and I think it's possible. Why? Because past generations had it. And if they had it, why can't we? Why can't we be bolder in our imagination for a compelling vision of the future? Tina asks, what's my take on the Canada Disability Benefit? I think it is criminal that the Liberal government agreed to deliver it without delay and then refused to. We moved in the House of Commons as New Democrats a minimum $2,200 a month guaranteed basic livable income for seniors and people living with disabilities. That was our policy. Liberals and Conservatives teamed up to vote it down. Because unfortunately, it's my opinion that Liberals only value people based on their production in the economy. In other words, if you're not a worker in like working for somebody collecting a wage, they don't value you. New Democrats value for your humanity. The question is now about UBI. So this is an important question. I stated guaranteed basic livable income. Somebody asked about a universal basic income. Why are those things different? The universal basic income could still result in legislating people into poverty and is often attached to the elimination of other social programs and services. So in other words, for conservatives and right-wing thinking economists, they push UBI because their thought is that people would get a meager sum, and then the government would cut all the other programs, and then the person would be left with their meager sum to pay for rent, to pay for food, to pay for all the other things. We're talking about a guaranteed basic livable income, which adjusts it to the cost of living, which understands that different regions have different costs, and doesn't actually result in people's services and programs getting cut. So the federal disability is a pain. Then I'm on ODSP. And when I claim taxes, I have to apply for it. Nate just brought out the essence of liberal means testing in a nutshell. So we do agree as New Democrats that if you qualify provincially, you should automatically qualify federally. How are there different standards of disability? But the fact that the federal government, both liberals and conservatives, create a system where you have to constantly prove your disability all the time at every level of government, at every stop, is horrible. That is atrocious. And so, yeah, no, I think if you qualify provincially, then you should be able to qualify federally. I'm just refreshing the stream here on Instagram. If you're on Instagram and there's a glitch in the matrix, I apologize for that. I'm trying to make sure that we get the link set up for you. Should you want to come and join the conversation, it's not letting me send it to the group chat for some reason. Post. Let's try that. I have maybe 10 minutes left, 15 minutes left. The reason why I was talking about education today is because today I'm going to be heading over to Eva Rothwell Center, where Mohawk College had a program, a free post-secondary entry program called City School that is being cut, and we're going to go rally to support city schools. So lots of good discussions on TikTok. TikTok is where it's at this morning. I appreciate folks for engaging there. I'm going to try to go back and forth between Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. We're on multiple platforms, and I'm a one-man production show, so forgive me if I've missed your questions. We're doing what we can here. It is 9:16. Let's see what we got. Nate says, good luck in the campaign. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We are absolutely grinding out from like 8:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night every day. Local elections matter. Do not have any preconceptions about the outcome of this election. Lots of stuff can change. Lots of things can change. This is what we need from you. If you agree with some of the things that I'm talking about, if you want to be involved, if you're sitting at home, it doesn't matter where you're at. We need you. We need you in this movement. And you can do that by visiting matthewgreen.ca/volunteer. When you do that, we'll follow up. Doesn't matter where you live. If you want to join on Call Hub and you want to call people from where you're at, you can do that. We can set you up so you can actually participate in this election, right? We talked about speculating and spectating. Sorry. Well, we talked about speculating too, but we talked about politics not being a spectator sport. We invite you to be involved. So if you agree with some of the things that we're talking about, I certainly don't expect you to agree with everything I'm saying. Help us build a movement that is rooted in solidarity. And please do visit matthewgreen.ca. We'll reach out to you. We need folks to volunteer and support. The best way to do that is to visit the website. We're going to be having a campaign launch this weekend, and that launch is going to be right here in Hamilton, about four shops down at this really cool punk rock bar called Vertigo. It's during the day. It's not we're not going to be having like a licensed liquor event. So it's going to be very family friendly. We're going to meet at 1 p.m. and that's right here in Hamilton. Again, if you want to join us, you can visit the website, let us know, put in the notes. You can volunteer from wherever you are. If you don't have time, but you are interested in supporting, we definitely do accept and appreciate. We do appreciate donations for sure. There's a question in TikTok that's an important one that needs answering. It says, for around people who have disabilities, what's our position? Oh, sorry, that's two of them. How do I feel about track two made? I actually opposed it. I opposed it. The position that I had on the question made, first, I abstained from the initial vote because I felt like there wasn't enough consultation with people actually living with disabilities, particularly low income people. And the stories that I heard of people who were legislated into poverty, who were suffering and miserable and thought that MAID could be used as a way out. The fact that we don't fund mental health, and yet we're going to allow people with mental health illness to apply for MAID, that's unconscionable for me. I'm not an expert on medical ethics, but I like to think I'm rooted, my politics are rooted in ethics. And I say, until we are providing for the material conditions of everybody, every single person living with disability, until there is absolutely no barriers to mental health, then we shouldn't be offering mental health as a precondition for medical assistance in dying. The only way that I could describe that, and I know that this may be hard for some folks to hear who might be on the other side of this debate, but the only way that I could describe that is social murder. I know that might sound harsh for people, but quite literally, if our system is designed to legislate into poverty, to push people into poverty, poverty is violence. They don't have any way out. They're living in misery, they're living in squalor, they're living in pain. And then rather than offer them the necessities of life, we offer them medical assistance in dying. That to me does not feel ethical. So Tina, that's my position on that. I don't know what your position is, but that's my position. And I believe that everybody deserves to have dignity, regardless of your age, your income, whether or not you're living through disabilities. Everybody living in this country deserves to live. Every person in the world, by the way, deserves to live a dignified existence. There is no ethical or moral argument for poverty. Poverty exists only to serve the purpose of the ultra, ultra, ultra wealthy, people that you and I will never meet, the 0.01% of the world, the 87 families who have more wealth than the bottom half of this country. Ooh, you got me fired up. I do, however, um, I do need to, jump off because I got to go. I have to go to Save City School because politics is also about showing up in person. It's about solidarity with principles. The conversation started out about thinking about what a world class education system would look like. What does a compelling alternative for the future of this country look like? I am challenging people who are logging on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. When you're in these discussions, do not reduce your vision of the country to Coke or Pepsi. Don't reduce it to the status quo versus regression. We can move forward on these issues. We don't have to face uncertainty with misery. We can face it with hope and joy and progress. We can build something beautiful. That's what I'm talking about. Matthew Green, Parliament to the People. I'm going to jump on a little bit later on at night. Today I talked about world-class education. Maybe tonight we should talk about what world-class healthcare looks like, given the questions that we had on medical assistance in dying, on Canadian disability benefits. Let's talk about that. I'll probably be back in around 12 hours because we're about to put a shift in. We're going to put in work here in Hamilton Center. Local elections matter. We're going to fight to earn every vote. We don't take anybody for granted. Democracy should not be a coronation. It shouldn't be a coronation. We should make every single politician in this country earn their votes. I'm not talking about voting for Mark Carney. Every single local candidate should have to earn their votes. Earn it. Get out there and talk to the community. That's what we're doing. Parliament to the People. I